Hey there, guys. I mentioned before in the previous live stream that I was going to be taking a look at the Baker incident report and giving my thoughts on it. Now, I do admit that I have read this report before, but I think I need to go through it again just to really get my thoughts out on the Baker incident reports. There may be some things that may be a little confusing to me, even though I've already read them, but it'll be interesting to go through. I've also pulled up the Shinso strategy guide from Resident Evil 7 because it details a lot of story details that weren't included in the actual game for Resident Evil 7. And I need to see if it contrasts with any lore that's been established in Resident Evil 7 because I've already shown that the lore in Resident Evil Village, it conflicts with a lot of the lore set up in Resident Evil 7, and they've neglected a lot of the things related to the mold in Resident Evil 7, and I'm thinking it might be the same case here with the Baker incident report, so it's just clear that new Capcom is having a lot of trouble really getting the lore established very well. But let's begin right now. So, the Baker incident report, this was all done by Zoe Baker, actually. This report depicts my investigation into the events after the incident at the Baker's residence. The Baker incident in July 2017, a number of people lost their lives at the residence in the middle of the American countryside. It was a truly horrifying tragedy. I still don't know the exact number of victims. Two survivors, husband and wife Ethan and Mia Winters, were able to shed some light on the events, which would have shook the world, but there was a cover-up and the Winterses vanished. But I mean, like, the whole world is already well aware of bioterrorism. I mean, what, they weren't aware of bioterrorism at all, even though Resident Evil 6 happened, even though Resident Evil Vendetta happened, even though Raccoon City happened? Would it really shook the world even more if Ethan Winters and Mia Winters had actually told the entire public about what happened at the Baker household? Why does there have to be a cover-up? It makes no sense at all. And I do find the cover-up to be a little stupid, the idea of it being a natural gas leak, as was indicated in that newspaper you find in Ethan's house in Resident Evil Village. That makes no sense at all. Like, I mean, dozens of people disappeared. And how do you explain where the bodies were? Like, how do you explain the disappearing bodies? That's what I don't get. There is someone or something powerful acting behind the scenes. I just know it. I decided to investigate, to follow the breadcrumbs of what happened after. How can I be so sure? Because I'm someone who was there. First of all, how was this incident reported upon its discovery by the world? Let's take a look at some newspaper clippings from that time to see how the news was manipulated. Discovery of the incident. So this was all part of the cover-up. So this is after the events of Resident Evil 7. This is a couple of days afterwards, because the events of Resident Evil 7 take place during the 19th. So local newspaper, the Dalby Daily, July 22nd, 2017. Family of 4 found dead in Dalby. Dalby County Sheriff's Office have reported that the Baker family were found dead in their home in North Dalby on the 21st of July. The surrounding details are currently unknown, apart from the deaths of Jack Baker, his wife Marguerite, their son Lucas, and daughter Zoe, but Zoe's not dead. She's alive. Deputy Sheriff Dave Anderson. So he was at the Baker household because he was apparently investigating the disappearance of Pete and Clancy and what was his name? Andre? I think that was the one. I think he was investigating those people, not just the other ones. But he's been missing since the 19th, according to Deputy Sheriff Riley Whiteford, who visited the Baker's residence around the time of his disappearance. Okay, so another deputy sheriff came around, it seems. Social media post, July 22nd, 2017. The thing with the dead family, wasn't that where that giant black monster was? What giant black monster? There's so many giant black monsters. What are you talking about? Are you talking about with Evelyn? Because she actually made herself known when she decided to attack Ethan. You think they were eaten by that thing? No way. It's not some cheesy horror movie. Old man Jack did say some crazy stuff. I remember him getting into a lot of fights. He probably killed the whole family, then offed himself. That's odd though, because wasn't Jack like the Shinto strategy guy details Jack as being a kind patriarch, and it was also kind of the same case in the Daughters DLC, but we do know that Jack had a fit with getting drunk a lot of the times, and that caused him to lash out at his family. Like that, this was indicated by the "fuck you" list that Lucas developed in the Daughters DLC. He probably killed the whole family then offed himself. Transcript of a complaint to the county sheriff's office. I don't believe it. It's been 2 days already, but you haven't reported anything else. Was it murder, an accident, suicide? And what's with the National Guard sealing the place off? What are you all hiding? And I think that's a typo right there. What are you all hiding? What are you all hiding? That's some weird grammar right there. That must have been a typo. I hope that typo incident doesn't detail the actual quality of this Baker incident report. Very little was reported shortly after the Baker incident was discovered, leading to rapid spread of rumors and speculation. The Bakers were completely isolated from the rest of the community, and sealing off the entire area around their home set things in motion. It really felt like it, because I didn't really see any other houses around, but I could have sworn that there are a lot of people that were well aware of the Bakers. But if they were well isolated from the rest of the community, why did people recognize who they were? Like, there were newspaper articles that detailed the Bakers. Unless, of course, like the Bakers maintained connections with other organizations like doctors or the like, or maybe like taxpayers, this and that, or like tax organizations. I mean, maybe it was something like that that caused them to be recognized as a family that had disappeared, even though they were completely isolated. I mean, it's still very odd though that the Bakers were able to isolate themselves very well. Like Lucas, for instance, when he killed Oliver, his bully, he locked him in the attic of the house, and somehow Jack and Marguerite Baker didn't notice it at all. If I were to lock someone in the attic, that person would be making a lot of noise. My parents would easily know about it. That doesn't make any sense at all. But, you know, like, they maintained a lot of electricity, there were other moving parts to the household. And yet somehow the people weren't really aware that the place wasn't exactly abandoned. That's confusing. I recall there sure was a lot of public pressure on the press for information. I admit that at the time I was being held in quarantine by a certain organization, and this certain organization is the BSAA. It's not Blue Umbrella, which is very strange, and couldn't see any of the news for myself. They finally allowed me to watch TV a few days after, and I was flabbergasted by the stark difference between the reports and reality. The cover-up. So, in a follow-up on the deaths of the Baker family on July 21st, the Dauphin County Sheriff's Office stated it is highly likely that their deaths were caused by a hydrogen sulfide leak. The local area is surrounded by wetlands, which combined with the concentration of pollution could have led to the buildup of toxic gas that claimed the lives of the Baker family. But again, where are the bodies? Where the heck are the bodies? I mean, you could say, oh, it's just the wildlife, but they didn't even bother putting that in the cover-up. And, you know, with the amount of tourists that just disappeared, you'd think it's very odd that tourists are the ones that were disappearing? You didn't bother accommodating for that? Are you serious? This is a pretty poor cover-up story. The leak has been blocked. However, the authorities have sealed off the area in order to prevent any further accidents. The victims included were deceased: Jack Baker, Marguerite Baker, Lucas Baker, Zoe Baker, Dave Anderson, Clancy Yavis, Andre Stickland, and Peter Walken. Injured: Ethan Winters and Mia Winters. Except there were way more victims than that. Come on, you were detailing all this in the news. You were detailing all this in the news, and you're not going to mention any of those other victims? What about the woman that had disappeared that Alyssa Ashcroft did a news article on? What about the boyfriend and girlfriend who were navigating the household and they even left notes behind? And they even detailed the shotgun in Resident Evil 7. That makes no sense. Why would they not include those victims? In fact, what about the list of names that were on that note at the beginning of Resident Evil 7 before you actually freed Mia from her cell? You know, there were way more victims than that. Social media post, July 30th, 2017. Toxic hydrogen sulfide gas. They're kidding, right? I heard there were soldiers, tanks, helicopters, the whole shebang when it happened. The government's up to something for sure. And here come the conspiracy theorists. A bunch of nutjobs like you came out of the woodwork during the Raccoon City incident too. But there was that black monster in that satellite photo of the shipwreck. You have to admit something's fishy. Something was fishy indeed. And why are they saying that conspiracy theorists came out of the woodwork? I mean, they nuked Raccoon City, for crying out loud. The whole idea of conspiracy theorists would just be completely redundant. Obviously, they nuked Raccoon City to prevent the bioterror incident from actually spreading to other areas. And that was the whole work of Derek C. Simmons, who wanted to also cover up the United States involvement with the creation of bioweapons, because if the United States were discovered to be in league with the likes of Umbrella with developing bioweapons, that would have caused the United States to lose all global authority, and like the entire like global political structure would have collapsed. And that was why the nuke was there in Raccoon City, because of Derek C. Simmons and his family. And I mean, during the events of Resident Evil 6, however, Derek C. Simmons gradually went mad, and he went against the family's like ideologies and actual structure. That he became rogue in the sense, and that's why the family discarded him in Resident Evil 6. But speaking of which, why do we not see the family return again? I mean, we know like the family in Resident Evil 6. I mean, there were certain like members in the government that were likely members of the family, and the family spanned generations. But why aren't they mentioned again? That's confusing. But not focusing on the family because that's entirely separate. We're talking about the connections. We're talking about the Baker family incident. So let's move on. Magazine Inspector, an interview with Sally Baldwin, professor of geological sciences at Minden University. Interviewer, so you don't agree with the report from the sheriff's office that it was a natural gas leak? Obviously. Baldwin, we can't rule it out completely, but it's very unusual, all things considered. Hydrogen sulfide builds up in areas where there is a lot of volcanic activity. The town of Dolby, however, has no volcanic activity anywhere in the area. My own geological survey in 1998 revealed absolutely no hydrogen sulfide in the area. Very odd that you were doing a geological survey around the time of the Raccoon City incident. Unless it was months afterwards, and it would still take place in 1998. A tragic natural gas leak. That was the official stance on the Baker incident, but this is a complete fabrication. Nothing about the murders in that house, nothing about the terrifying monsters that stalked the halls and lived within its walls. It's evident that someone was keeping the truth hidden. The thing that surprised me the most was the fact that my name was on the list of victims. The organization, a la the BSAA, still had me in quarantine. I was terrified the whole thing would come to an end with me actually being among the deceased. Thankfully, it was a needless fear. The organization gave me a new identity and let me go. I guess they figured I was harmless and didn't know anything else. I was allowed to live as a new person, apparently for my own safety. I tried to contact the other two survivors, Ethan and Mia. They saved my life after all. I wanted to at least thank them, but they completely disappeared. I know the organization knows where they are, so I decided to investigate the BSAA. The BSAA, the Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance, a counter-bioterrorism organization sanctioned by the United Nations. It was formed to combat the rise in bioterrorism after the collapse of Umbrella Pharmaceuticals. They have combated terrorism across the world, including China and Europe, and are highly regarded as bioterrorist police. The BSAA finally intervened in the Baker incident and were the ones that saved Ethan, Mia, and I. Now this is where the first thing makes no sense. It was not the BSAA that intervened, it was Blue Umbrella. We even see their chopper in a cutscene. We even see the photo that shows it was a Blue Umbrella helicopter. The BSAA had no kind of involvement with it at all. It was Blue Umbrella that came in. And the only way the BSAA were involved is through Chris Redfield. And also through, No, it was just Chris Redfield, actually. He was the only member of the BSAA there. I mean, maybe there were other, soldiers alongside him. I mean, those 3 soldiers that were killed by Lucas, were they with, Blue Umbrella, or were they with, the BSAA. But that's really the only way that you can rationalize this. I mean, maybe she's saying that it was actually Chris. You know, the fact that the BSAA sent Chris, that's why she's saying the BSAA finally intervened. And also, with giving this brief summary on the BSAA, I find it a little odd because it's almost like the BSAA aren't renowned as being a world organization that's there to combat bioterrorism. I mean, they've combated how many bioterrorism incidents? I mean, the world is already well aware of bioterrorism with the Raccoon City incident, with the Terra Grigia panic, with the Lanchang incident, with the bioterrorism outbreak in Adonia. But then, why is she acting like they're not actually that well known? And she's giving us this summary. I mean, it must be there for our purposes, specifically us gamers, in case people aren't that well versed with the Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance. And Chris was one of the founding members of the BSA. He was one of the original 11. So, as much as it is nice for her to give us a brief summary, even though it's not the best, I mean, it still seems odd that she would give this summary. Thanks to my detainment in their facility, I have a pretty good idea of who their members are. I was very, very persuasive when it came to asking them about the organization and top secret documents. See, that doesn't make any sense, though. I don't see why that was possible. I mean, there must have been some bad seeds, apparently, in the BSAA, or people who were easily, like, prone to suggestion or something. I don't know. I don't know how she managed to persuade them to give them information about the organization and the top secret documents. That just seems rather silly to me, but I guess they had to find some way of integrating Zoe Baker into this as a way of tying together the events of Resident Evil 7 to Resident Evil Village in some creative way involving Zoe Baker. But I guess they just settled with this, which is pretty lazy if you ask me. There's no way that should be possible for Zoe Baker to be very persuasive. But there have to be some possible explanations as to how she was able to obtain these documents. I mean, top secret documents, for crying out loud. I mean, she must have had close connection with some of these members if she was able to uncover these documents. I mean, maybe there were some members who were pretty close to her, similar to how Claire was very close to Sherry when she was being held by the US government to actually study the virus within her, and Claire was the only one who provided support. So maybe it was something like that. The topic I was most interested in, of course, was the Baker incident. I wanted to know the truth the BSAA was hiding. And this is where the secretive nature of the BSAA really doesn't make any sense. I don't know why they're acting so secretive in this game. It just seems so sudden. There's no build-up to Resident Evil Village that indicates that the BSAA is now evil. They even indicate in the concept art that the BSAA is now a rotten organization. So you can totally understand why Chris Redfield is going rogue, and why he just seems very odd in this game. Because he's going against the BSAA because they're a rotten organization. But if they are rotten, what about the other members? Like, what about Joe Valentine? What about Sheva Alomar? What about the other soldiers that Chris was under command of in Resident Evil 6? And what about Parker from Resident Evil Revelations? You know, what happened to those members? Are they working alongside Chris, or are they still in the BSAA but they're actually uncovering a lot of dirt on the BSAA? Just making the BSAA a rotten organization immediately is just such a strange choice. It's not masterful storytelling at all. And they promised that Resident Evil Village would have masterful storytelling, but the storytelling in Resident Evil Village doesn't make any sense at all. It's not that masterful. It presents with a lot of plot holes and complete disregard for the lore in Resident Evil 7. And now they're pulling this stunt with the BSAA suddenly being evil. Why do they need to hide anything, of course? I mean, they're, like, look at the Marhara, like, Academy incident before the events of Resident Evil 6, where we saw the C-virus mutation happening. I mean, like, it was a pretty bad incident, I imagine. But BSAA, I don't think they hid anything. I mean, maybe they did in order to prevent mass panic. Or what, has the BSAA been hiding a lot of things? Like, it's confusing. In order to prevent, like, mass panic or something? The hidden truth. So, secret meeting between the sheriff and international organization. Which, again, it's the BSAA. Why are they not saying sheriff and BSAA? That makes no sense. One of our reporters has unearthed evidence that a secret meeting happened between Dulvey Sheriff Coleridge and an international organization known as the BSAA. Many have voiced their concerns around the legitimacy of the sheriff's office statement that the incident at the Baker estate was caused by a toxic gas leak. And specifically, like, if it was at the Baker estate, why are you saying specifically the Baker estate? Why not just say, like, that specific area of Dovey? Why are you making the Baker estate the center point of this toxic gas leak, as if they're the ones that are somehow important? That just seems odd to me. Inspector suspects there might be more to the story, and the sheriff's office and BSAA are covering something up. We reached out to the sheriff's department, but they refused to give a statement. Edgar McClintock. Also, if this guy has actually been in the previous Resident Evil games, that's intriguing. I feel like that name is familiar. I mean, Alicia Ashcroft was a character in Resident Evil Outbreak, and we played as her. So, to have that homage to Resident Evil Village was nice, but I wonder if it's the same case with Edgar McClintock. So, BSAA Investigations Department, final report on the Baker incident. The following details the investigation into the biological disaster in Dulvey, Louisiana, also known as the Baker incident. This document is for employees with Class B clearance and above. We have concluded that the Baker incident was caused by an accidental contamination from a prototype bioweapon known as Evelyn, or the E-type mutamycete, or E-series. The residents of the Baker household were contaminated by a mold-like pathogen, mutamycete. Now I'm confused as to what they mean by mold-like pathogen. Like, what exactly does that mean? That just seems kind of redundant to make that kind of statement. A mold-like pathogen. Why not just say mold or just mutamycete? Like, what exactly is a pathogen? Like, the actual clear definition of a pathogen. A bacterium, virus, or other microorganism that can cause disease. I mean, there are parts of this that are a little odd, though, because I thought the mutamycete was the anomalous bacterium. Like, the actual, like Evelyn was composed entirely of bacteria, not mold or fungi. But I'm guessing what they mean by mold-like pathogen is the idea of the anomalous bacterium. It's like this anomalous bacterium that was infected by the mold. And that's like what we got with the megamycete, for instance. The megamycete was a series of nematodes that were contaminated by the mold, or what? That was actually the Kadu parasite, I think, not the actual megamycete. But either way, they're superorganisms. So they must be bacterium in a way, but the parasite itself, the Kadu parasite, was created when a series of nematodes were exposed to the mold as a more effective transference process of infecting the individual with the mold. And I'm not too sure exactly if a parasite is capable of rewriting the genetic data or if somehow they were able to access the DNA more effectively and therefore rewrite the coding with that individual to lead to that kind of problem. But I'm guessing that's what it is. So Evelyn was capable of rapidly producing this mold, and it enabled her to control those infected both mentally and physically. Because that is true, of course, that fungus in the brain can lead to hallucinations and the like, and physically with the mutations we see with Jack, Marguerite, and Lucas Baker, and with the other members of that society with the four lords in Resident Evil Village. The Baker family were not the only victims. Evelyn manipulated the Bakers into kidnapping dozens of people. Well, then why didn't you say all that in the deceased column previously? These victims were infected and mutated into monstrous creatures called molded. Evelyn was originally created in a Munich research facility by the international crime syndicate The Connections. BSAA dispatched a team to destroy Evelyn. The mission, however, was not successful and Evelyn escaped. Evelyn was then transferred to America, specifically Central America. I don't know why they're just saying America, almost like it's the United States, but it's Central America, by The Connections, via ship along with her caretaker, Mia Winters. However, Evelyn managed to escape during transport. She murdered most of the ship's crew and destroyed the ship. We believe she then abandoned the vessel that had washed up in the bayou near the Baker residence. Oh, you know what? Wait, Evelyn was originally created in a Munich research facility, so it's somewhere in Europe, but also the village was also somewhere in Europe. So maybe the fact that they were close to each other, maybe the fact that they were kind of dwelling in a very similar area allowed the Connections to maintain contact with Mother Miranda, which would then allow her to give the Ava's DNA and also some of her mold to the Connections, which would then allow the creation of Evelyn. And that's probably what it is. So maybe the fact that Evelyn was originally created in a Munich research facility, it's likely did they establish this facility after they met with Mother Miranda? And furthermore, how did the Connections even find out about Mother Miranda? How did they find her? I mean, like, we know the Connections maintained contact with HCF, which was Wesker's private force, and they detailed this. Like the whole project involving Evelyn began around 2000, and we know that that Mother Miranda had lost her daughter around 1919, and she was 10 years old, which was definitely the reason why Evelyn appeared as a 10-year-old girl, because of the fact that it was a 10-year-old Ava who had her DNA be given to Evelyn when she died. Lots of questions involved with this. The aforementioned operation to eliminate Evelyn was BSAA's failing. We cannot deny that, as it resulted in Evelyn infecting innocent civilians. Yeah, but look at the Marhaba Academy incident. I mean, that was where we saw the first use of the C virus. I mean, I haven't read the comic itself, but I'm pretty sure the BSAA didn't resort to such secretive nature like this, and just kept all this information hidden from the public. That makes no sense. I don't know why the BSAA is acting like this. BSAA will have to take responsibility should these events ever come to light. As such, we advise that a cover story is fed to the media and BSAA's involvement is kept quiet. End of report. So now we have the E-Series mutamycete analysis report. Biological analysis report on the E-Series mutamycete, henceforth referred to as mutamycete, recovered from the Baker residence. The Mutamycete has similar characteristics to Cladosporium, also known as black mold, and has incredibly high reproductive properties. It acts like a parasite, infecting the cells and rewriting the DNA of its host. I mean, I don't know if it was necessarily rewriting the DNA. It was more so that they ingested nutrients from the cells to propagate throughout the body, and the reason why the host was able to regenerate was because of this abnormal activation of the ERK pathway, which then led to increased regeneration, as detailed in the Endozoe report that we get at the beginning of the final boss fight. So I don't know if it's more about rewriting the DNA of its host. I mean, if it's all about rewriting the DNA of its host, then they turned into quite a mess. I mean, Jack Baker. I mean, look at the way he was at the end of Resident Evil 7 when Ethan encountered him in that boathouse. He was a mess. It was just you couldn't recognize him. There's no real shape to him. So it just seems like a very odd choice to say rewriting the DNA of its host. I mean, rewriting in the sense that, I mean, the Mutamycete genome was introduced into a pre-stage 4 embryo, which then led to the creation of Evelyn and the other series, but the A through D series, they were considered faulty, whereas the E series was perfected. So I don't know if it's anything related to DNA. I mean, I've looked at the Shinso uh, official guide on Resident Evil 7, and it doesn't really mention anything about DNA. Furthermore, when it combines with other bacteria, it creates its own muscle tissue, brain, and nervous system. So this was something that really confused me, but it's good that they acknowledged it here. I was very confused as to what exactly we were dealing with the mold. I wasn't sure if it was bacteria or actual fungus, because the amount of continuity errors present with the translation in Resident Evil 7, it led to a lot of confusion because, like, for instance, they don't use the term Mutamycete in the Japanese localization, they just refer to it as fungus. But then there are other incidences where it's mentioned that the mold is a bacteria, but then there are other moments where it's a fungus. And it must be due to terrible wording, but they're saying here that the mold infected other bacterial colonies, and those bacterial colonies therefore came together to create the molded. But with regards to humans, I believe what happened was with certain molded, like the normal molded, the human remains served as fuel, or they definitely helped contribute a bit to the shape. Whereas with the fat molded, we know in the Not a Hero DLC, it's mentioned that Lucas killed a researcher who then became a fat molded, but I believe there are, like in the Shinso strategy guide, it mentions that the fat molded is entirely composed of bacteria, not really human remains. Fat molded. An obese molded with greatly increased vitality. The bodily fluids that flow through its body are strongly acidic, and it not only vomits them from its mouth, but they also spew from its wounds when damaged. Okay, that's not what I need. Where was that mentioned before? I could have sworn there was some mention about the fat molded being not entirely composed of human remains, but that's not true. It must be because of that. Or is it saying here that when it combines with other bacteria present within the body, because we have thousands of bacterial colonies within our bodies, like it combines with those bacteria specifically, it creates some muscle tissue, brain, and nervous system. Like it's mentioned in the Shinso strategy guide that the molded have their own nervous system. So it says right here that so with the molded, it's a human that has been infected by the anomalous fungus and transformed into a completely different entity. It loses its intelligence and attacks prey on instinct. It has unusually high vitality, but ceases function when the central nervous system in its head is destroyed. So it's saying right here, it's the bacteria, like when the mold combines with the bacteria, it creates its own muscle tissue, brain, and nervous system. But why don't we see the molded return in Resident Evil Village? Why did they become Lycans and Moriekas? I mean, the only thing I can think of, like, I believe it's mentioned that in a document in Moreau's area, the Lycans came into place when Moreau injected wolf's blood into the spines. And I thought that was for the specific creation of the Varkalak, but I think it also occurs with Lycans as well. And maybe with the Moriekas, when they transform into Samkas, maybe what happened was Dimitrescu was experimenting on bats, because there were mines around, and bats often dwell in mine shafts, so maybe she used bats to um, create this new version of the Morieka, which is the Samka, because the Megamycete or the mold or the Mutamycete or the Kadoo parasite, Like it's capable of accepting genetic data from other organisms. So maybe that's why. And maybe that's also why Marguerite was the way she was. Maybe what happened with Marguerite was mold came into contact with Marguerite as well as insects, and it must have resulted in some kind of fusion together, giving Marguerite the ability to control insects. And she even has her own hive when she reaches stage 3 mutation. Or maybe the hive is already present within her, but we don't really see anything like under her clothes because she doesn't reveal it. Intriguing. As such, an organism infected with the mutamycete transforms into a type of undead monster. That is a pretty shitty report. You call this a detailed report? Like, what is this? E-Series Mutamycete analysis report? They completely disregarded the stage mutations. What about the whole moment with the early stages where the mold actually leads to abnormal activation of the ERK pathway and the ingestion of nutrients to essentially propagate the mold throughout the entire body, and that abnormal activation of the ERK pathway leads to regeneration, as we see with Jack Baker. And the reason why Jack Baker's regeneration is so extreme compared to Marguerite and Lucas is because his Hayflick limit, which is the point where cell division stops, and it's a theoretical limit. Hayflick himself established it, but I don't think it's been properly proven. It's like 40 to 60 cell divisions or something, but it seems like Jack's Hayflick limit is incredibly high, as was indicated in that document. So that's why his regeneration was extreme. But then, with the way he mutated further in Resident Evil 7, becoming what he was at the boathouse area, you could totally understand why, because of the extreme injuries he sustained in this chainsaw battle with Ethan. But then why does he revert back to human form in the End of Zoe DLC? That right there is confusing. I mean, is Jack somehow able to maintain some amount of control over the mold now that Evelyn is dead? That right there doesn't make any sense at all, and maybe it also results from the fact that Jack was injected with the serum, and maybe the serum, while it didn't work because the serum was specifically tailored to D series infections, not E series infections, so the whole creation of the serum didn't really work. Maybe the serum had some adverse effect on Jack, reverting him to a very basic form with his human form in the End of Zoe DLC. Maybe it's because of that. But either way, it's kind of confusing with that aspect of Jack in the End of Zoe DLC. But that's precisely why Jack was the way he was. But they don't mention anything about that in the Baker incident report. And then with the stage 2 mutation, it doesn't mention anything about the mold reaching the brainstem, and then that is what allows Evelyn to maintain control. Like the subjects, the host's thoughts become in tune with the subject's memories or subject's thoughts entirely. That's why Jack and Marguerite and Lucas at one point fell under the influence of Evelyn, and the psychological shock that was triggered within the brain due to the self-mutilation that Evelyn forced them to commit allowed the mind's barriers to be broken down, which then allowed Evelyn even more control. But there's no mention of that here, and there's not even mention of stage 3 mutations. So that doesn't make any sense at all, and I don't know why the report is so basic here. Oh, look at this. Bioweapon report file. A human biological weapon constructed through the implantation of mutamycete into a human embryo. So that's what I mentioned with the mutamycete genome being implanted into a pre-stage 4 embryo, and this became Evelyn, and it's specifically a 10-year-old girl because of Ava's DNA, as was indicated in Resident Evil Village. In Miranda's diary, near the end of Chris's section, has the ability to infect with a fungal network and control hosts through brainwave signals. I mean, the brainwave signals part is a little confusing because in the R&D report that you get in Resident Evil 7, it mentions that the way in which Evelyn maintains this kind of control is through a very similar system with Pseudomonas bacteria, where the auto-inducer pheromones, it's related to quorum sensing in Pseudomonas bacteria, but it has to do with the auto-inducer pheromones. That was the theory at the time. In fact, let me look back at this report real quick. So it says here, it is also of note that Evelyn's mutamycete imposes a profound control over body and mind when introduced into a host organism. We still have a lot to learn about the mechanism by which Evelyn achieves and maintains this control, but the working theory is that the vector is similar to the auto-inducer pheromones used for quorum sensing in Pseudomonas bacteria. But again, they haven't mentioned that, or maybe this is the BSAA's interpretation of this, but it's a pretty basic interpretation. Like, why is everything so basic? It makes no sense. Evelyn was driven by a natural instinct to create a family, and the infected victims she controlled were her surrogate family. However, due to an innate defect in her chromosomes, which is what I mentioned many times throughout my playthroughs of Resident Evil Village, Evelyn's cells reproduced at an accelerated rate, causing her to age rapidly, then die. So the natural instinct to create a family was the result of Evelyn being raised in isolation within the Connections research facility. But I mean, like, if the Megamycete is capable of actually taking on the genetic data of organisms, does it also take upon their memories? Like, it just feels like there are times when Resident Evil Village and occasionally Resident Evil 7 embraces the whole idea of genetic memories, almost like with Carl Jung's theory, but I don't think that theory's been proven effectively. But is it possible that maybe... No, it couldn't be. It's not possible. I was thinking that maybe Ava had a very similar natural instinct to create a family, and that's what transposes onto Evelyn. But I don't think that's the case at all. But anyway, let's move on. The Connections report. The Connections is a crime syndicate with no base of operations. Their organizational structure is unknown. However, we are aware of their actions on the global level. In recent years, they have been particularly active in Eastern Europe, in the Munich facility, when they were developing Evelyn. Most of their activities appear to revolve around the creation and selling of bioweapons. Evelyn was one of their products. So the connection sounds very similar to Umbrella. They sounded very similar to the original version of Umbrella as well in the Not a Hero DLC, but this one's it sounds like it's a little bit more diverse than that. And I wonder how expansive Umbrella was. I mean, Umbrella established many facilities throughout the world. That's what we got with Resident Evil 5 with the Africa Research Center in Umbrella, where they were studying the progenitor virus that would eventually become the T virus, the very thing that started Resident Evil. But then the whole idea of Oswald Lee Spencer being inferior to Mother Miranda and the fact that her exploits inspired him to actually look at viral vectors and to create a new generation of humans. That's even more crazy. And he happened to stumble upon her village, and then Mother Miranda nursed him back to health, and then they discuss their sciences together. And it's a very intriguing idea, and like Oswald Lee Spencer has lived a very long lifetime as well, and maybe Mother Miranda kind of sympathized with him in that moment. And maybe in some weird way, Mother Miranda sensed evil in Oswald Lee Spencer. So, one evil person can bond with another evil person. One sociopath can relate to another sociopath. Well, it really seems like they're more so psychopaths with how intelligent they are. But that is insane. Like, I said in my blind playthrough that it'd be crazy if they somehow tied in this whole society in Resident Evil Village to Umbrella's founding, because this society has been around before the events of Project W. Project W being the creation of the Wesker siblings, and Albert Wesker being one of them, Alex Wesker being another one as well. So the fact that it all took place before that, it led me to believe that maybe they were going to do a plot twist, and I was just joking about it, but then actually seeing it at the end was truly incredible. But it does leave a lot of questions as well. But it's so hard to believe that Resident Evil Village is actually the true origin of Resident Evil and not Resident Evil 1, which in a weird way I do like, because I don't like Resident Evil 1 at all. I mean, specifically Resident Evil 1 Remake. Resident Evil Village is a little bit better, but it's still pretty shit as a game. Reliable sources have confirmed that the criminal organization was founded by Brandon Bailey. So we finally know one of its members for a change, aside from Mia Winters and Alan Droney. Bailey is a shrewd man and was once the right-hand man of Oswald E. Spencer, CEO and president of the Umbrella Corporation. His current status and location unknown. So wow, they've tried their best to tie in the connections with Umbrella even more by making this guy the right-hand man of Oswald E. Spencer. And I'm guessing that's why he was able to maintain connections with the HCF team, although didn't the HCF team that Albert Wesker commandeered, or rather he manned or led, were they actually independent of Umbrella? Because, I mean, wasn't Albert Wesker working with a rival organization, not Umbrella? And we still don't know who this rival organization was. That right there is very confusing. Like they've elaborated on these other organizations. I mean, they elaborate a bit on the family and on Neo Umbrella and on Tricell, but not so much with the rival organization. And we know that Ada was working for the rival organization as well. She wasn't working with Umbrella. But there's no details about the rival organization at all, like ever since Resident Evil 5. We got introduced to the rival organization a bit in Resident Evil 4, or rather, like that was the last time we heard about them, and then we haven't heard from them ever since. So that's confusing. But Bailey and Spencer became estranged due to differing visions, and Bailey used the connections he made working as the director of the Umbrella Africa Research Center to branch off and found the criminal syndicate. So was he aware of the T virus? Was he aware of the progenitor virus? Because the only reason that facility was established there was to study the progenitor virus, correct? It must have been that. The organization's main goal appears to simply be commercial gain. Further investigations are in progress. Well, that's pretty feeble. So maybe differing visions have to mainly do with Bailey being greedy and Spencer actually wanting to change human evolution entirely and actually make himself a god. That's why I was looking at, for instance, telomere shortening in the Lost Snipers DLC in Resident Evil 5. And that's why he viewed viruses as being a more effective vector compared to the Megamycete in Resident Evil Village. I mean, he mentioned this in a note. And I don't know why so many idiots have been saying that the T virus was actually started from the mold. Do these people not understand the lore? Are they fucking serious? He never mentioned anything about the T virus actually originating from the mold. It originated from the progenitor virus from flowers in Africa. And yet people have somehow managed to twist the facts in the notes to suit their own like dumb theories, and it's retarded. I don't get it at all. But let's continue on. So according to BSAA's top secret documents, the Baker incident, as I know it, was just another statistical blip to be recorded. That fabled night when the tanker washed up in the bayou, which was the SS Annabelle, by the way, that was the name of the tanker. And it was so very odd that they accepted passengers. Why did they accept Mia and Alan and Evelyn? I mean, it's not meant for passengers. It's not some cruise ship. It's just a tanker. Why'd they take them? And how the heck did the connections like put them on there? And why a tanker of all places? Why not a cruise ship? Like, when you look at Resident Evil Revelations, for instance, with the way Veltro hid their facilities within each of the 3 ships, Jill asked this question to Chris, and she asked, why try to hide these facilities on a cruise ship? It makes a good cover. Who would ever suspect it? That's what Chris said. Like, a cruise ship makes a lot more sense than a tanker, but I guess I didn't want to repeat the same thing with Resident Evil Revelations. It just seemed very dumb to repeat the exact same thing that Veltro did with hiding their facilities on a cruise ship. It would probably come across as reusing an idea, which is why they went with a tanker. But I'll have to look at it more in the concept art as to why they chose a tanker for this. Jack took that little girl from the shipwreck and into her home. Why did she call him Jack? Why not Daddy? I mean, it's her own personal report. It's not like she's releasing this to the public. She admits this at the end of the Baker incident report. Like, why is she saying Jack and not Daddy? Does she not want to... Is it because she doesn't want to associate with him anymore? I mean, even though Joe Baker did try to reassure her that they were still her family and that they still loved her to a great extent, but it's like Zoe wants to dissociate from that. She wants to dissociate from the traumas she experienced in the Baker household by just referring to her dad as Jack and not Daddy or anything like that. So that just seems odd to me. That might be a potential explanation. Then she turned everyone crazy, made us into monsters. BSAA knew this when they manipulated the media and covered the whole thing up. An easy thing to do for an organization with a direct backing from the United Nations. They couldn't let anyone know it was them who let Evelyn the cause of all this escape. But that begs the question, though, how exactly did they blunder the operation? How did Evelyn escape? And how is it that they weren't able to track her down? How did Evelyn escape, and how did the connections transfer her so easily, like, without any kind of detection? How did the BSAA not find them until later on? And it's mentioned in the timeline that fan set up that the BSAA / Blue Umbrella, they received an anonymous tip indicating the location of Evelyn in the Connections facility and the fact that the Baker household was under like a biohazard. But what was that unknown source, and why was it an unknown source? Why was it not something else? That it's like Capcom's trying to take such cheap shortcuts with the way they're trying to tell the stories in Resident Evil 7 and Village, and I don't like it at all. As much as I do understand that they're trying to make the stories vague to add more intrigue to the stories, they're introducing so many plot holes, and they're not trying to be specific in moments where it should be specific. And because of that, it's just led to the lore getting messed up so much. And they fucked Resident Evil 7's lore with Resident Evil Village, with making Ethan out of the mold, for instance. So it's clear that there's a lot of miscommunication involved with the actual conveyance of the lore. and it's all due to the way Capcom's been handling the story. And it's just I've never really seen lore in Resident Evil take that many shortcuts with allowing a lot of designs to pass. And it's something I'm just finding a hard time liking. It's one of the main aspects of Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil Village that I don't like. Everything else with Resident Evil 7 I love, but with Resident Evil Village, there are still gameplay aspects that I don't like. And a lot of people have agreed with me on this. I'm not going to mention it again because I've already mentioned it way too many times. Let's just continue on. I continue to investigate and finally caught wind of Ethan and Mia's location. Most likely from those sources and people that she maintained contact with, I imagine. So, BSAA Investigations Department, transcript of interview with Ethan Winters. Shall we begin then? Please state your name and occupation. Ethan Winters, I'm a systems engineer. Which, by the way, I said before that Ethan was actually a systems engineer in Texas, but it turns out, in the Shinso official strategy guide for Resident Evil 7, it mentions that he's a systems engineer in Los Angeles. Now, as to whether this was before or after meeting Mia, I'm not too sure. I don't think the guide specifies this with Ethan Winters. Like it says here, he's a systems engineer residing in Los Angeles. He lost his wife Mia in an accident at sea 3 years ago. So was he in Los Angeles after Mia disappeared? That's what this wording would suggest. And then we have Mia. So Mia had worked at a trading company and was frequently going on business trips to foreign countries. And her relationship with Ethan was starting to become strained as she was often away from home for long periods of time. But the weird thing is that the Shinso strategy guide doesn't mention anything about Mia working with the connections. Now I'm reading more on the lore here, but we know that Ethan and Mia were married in 2011. And Mia describes her job merely as working at a trading company. Okay, so it wasn't that she wasn't working at a trading company. It was just that she covered up the whole connection she had with the connections as a trading company work. So that's what it was. So 2014. So this was in 2014, and it's unknown. But Chris Redfield's investigation team draws near the European research facility of the mysterious organization, which was the Connections, which was raising Evelyn. We know it's in Munich. The mysterious organization decides to relocate Evelyn from the Munich research facility / European research facility to Central America. Mia and Alan transport Evelyn in October 2014 aboard a private LNG tanker known as the SS Annabelle. Is it SS or is it just Annabelle? I don't know what it's called. But the ship is wrecked by Evelyn going out of control. And that's where the whole events of Resident Evil 7 begin. And we know that the connection somehow allowed Lucas to break free of Evelyn's control. Which, there's still no explanation for how that's the case. It can't be due to the serum, surely. It's not like the connections had any kind of like discarded D-series material, or maybe they were actually doing stuff with it to maybe perfect their own because they saw how out of control Evelyn was. Because we know what the White Molded were specifically designed by the Connections after they realized that Evelyn was not really good, and they really understood the faults with Evelyn given her chromosomal deficiencies and abnormalities. So that's why they behave so differently compared to Evelyn's black mold. And we know that the mold actually ran out of control after Evelyn died. So it's not that the mold just stopped entirely, it just ran out of control. But that's really okay, wait. Evelyn's control of Mia. So in November 2015, Evelyn's control of Mia is unstable and she imprisons her in an abandoned house away from the Baker mansion. And then in September 2016, Evelyn's aging process begins. So yeah, there's nothing really important here, but we know in July 18, 2017, Evelyn controls Mia to send an email to Ethan calling him to the Baker's mansion because she accidentally let it slip during one of her lucid moments. But there's not much to really say right there. But how many times do we have to do this? When are you going to let us go? Our interviews until now have been necessary to conclude if you had any ulterior motives. Now wait. Before I continue on with this, why exactly did Mia marry Ethan if she was working with the Connections? You think a secret criminal syndicate would try to ensure that their members were not at all married at all, so that they didn't have any kind of personal attachments? Although technically, we know with Umbrella. There's a researcher by the name of John who fell in love with Ada, because Ada was posing as someone else in order to gain access to Umbrella's research. I'm not sure what specifically with Umbrella's research, but maybe it was the result of the G virus, because that's indicated in the original version of Resident Evil 2, which for some reason they didn't touch upon in Resident Evil 2 Remake. So, maybe there were like relationships going on, but why take the chance? If this is a secret criminal syndicate, why would they allow Mia to marry Ethan? Or did she actually join the connections after she married Ethan? And how did she find the connections, though? That's what I'd like to know. So, our interviews until now have been necessary to conclude if you had any ulterior motives. I'm not sure what they mean by ulterior motives. Now, we understand that you were just an innocent victim in this whole incident, so you're going to let us go. Yes, but we have one condition. What's that? We would like you and your wife to remain under our supervision. In exchange, we will provide you with a new home, a new country. What are you saying? You want us to take on new identities? Wait, a new country? You want us to move to another country? To a lovely country in Eastern Europe, to be precise. Europe? You gotta be kidding me. Why the hell would we? You are both witnesses to what happened. There is a certain criminal organization who is looking for you, which is the Connections. And, I don't know how, but Ethan isn't actually aware of Mia's connection with the Connections. Like he says in Resident Evil 7, as they're on that boat, he says that, Mia, I know you've been through a lot, but we need to talk. You had something to do with all this, didn't you? Like, there's clearly some indication that Ethan is very suspicious of Mia, and he said that he wants to know the truth. But what, did he somehow forget about what he said just then when he reunited with Mia at the end of Resident Evil 7? That's stupid. It makes no sense for a story because this is all taking place within a game, within a fictional piece of media. So you'd think that by introducing that whole dialogue with Ethan, we'd actually get this touched upon in Resident Evil Village, but we don't. And this is confusing. So we know that the Connections are looking for them, likely because they know about Mia's mold contamination. So it's likely that they wanted to find her in order to ensure that they could do research on her or actually stop her from releasing any evidence. And then with Ethan, it's probably the latter case. But BSAA was already covering up a lot of the evidence, so what exactly would the Connections be searching for them for? So we are doing this for your protection. Think of it more like witness protection, but all the way to Europe without any say. You can forget everything you experienced here, start a new life. It's better for both of you that way. There's no way we can forget everything that happened. I want to talk to Mia about this. Let me talk to Mia. And then we have the transcript of interview with Mia Winters. According to our examinations, you are mostly free of the mold now, Mia. See, they freed her of the mold here, but why didn't they do the same with Ethan? It's standard procedure for every single organization that handles biohazards to test people who haven't even experienced any symptoms. What if it was asymptomatic? What if Ethan's case was asymptomatic? Why did they not test Ethan? And that would then allow them to understand that Ethan was made out of the mold. They only did it with Mia. What the fuck is that shit about? It's a massive oversight. The fact that they could miss something as basic as that, and yet they still went on with making Ethan made out of the mold. It's dumb. It's really dumb. It's almost like how in Assassin's Creed, when they established the origin of the Leap of Faith in Assassin's Creed Origins, but then in the next game they completely disregarded the origins of the Leap of Faith and just made characters that existed way before Bayek did the Leap of Faith, just doing the Leap of Faith freely with no sort of thought at all. And then they didn't even consider the formation of the pyramids of Giza, in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. When they were showcasing the pyramids being built after they were already established, that was a massive oversight. And how they missed that is just beyond me. It's just pure stupidity. But this right here is just a little different. I just feel like this is a minor continuity error. And it's not really minor, though. It's major if you consider that Ethan is made out of the mold, but you can't really... It's almost like Capcom is saying, no, don't think about it. We'll just kill him off at the end of the game so that you don't have to think about it at all. But it's lazy, it's goofy, it's comical, it just shows complete disregard for the lore in Resident Evil 7 and the story elements that you set up in Resident Evil 7, and it completely goes against any logic at all. You're relying upon illogical actions to set up a story in Resident Evil Village of Ethan being made out of the mold. That makes no sense at all. You think this is how the CDC handles outbreaks? You think they just when someone says, "Oh, I'm feeling fine," okay, you're free to go and live out your life. You think that's how they work? That's not how they fucking work. Why wasn't Ethan put in quarantine as well? I mean, he was clearly here, but then why wasn't he tested for the mold? It's just I don't understand why they made this kind of oversight. It's such a basic error, and like it borders on pure stupidity. Like it makes no sense. Unless they somehow retcon it in Resident Evil 9, which if they retcon it, that'll just make it even more hilarious. Did you tell him about my past? Which, no, as a sign of appreciation of your cooperation, BSAA has not divulged your involvement with the connections. Which, what the hell? Ethan was clearly suspecting Mia of being with the connections. She even sent in an email to Ethan at the very beginning of Resident Evil 7 that, Ethan, you were right. I did lie to you. I shouldn't have, but all I can say is that if you get this, stay away, forget that you ever knew me, have a good life. Like, she clearly, divulged in secret her connection with the connections, almost confirming that Ethan had suspicions about her, but they're disregarding all that. Did they not construct all this while they were playing alongside Resident Evil 7? It makes no sense. I just want to return to a normal life with Ethan, to forget everything. Audio ends. Ethan and Mia are in Europe. I was excited that I finally had a clue into their whereabouts. However, that was where my investigation hit a brick wall. BSAA's security is tight, and even with some acquaintances helping me out, no one knew the Wintersea's exact location, which makes sense when you consider an international crime syndicate is after them. 2 years passed and no progress. I ended up working as a rookie reporter for a small newspaper in New Orleans. The Baker incident has all but vanished from people's minds. Then one day, a letter arrived at my tiny apartment. It was from none other than Mia Winters herself. Mia's letter. Hey, how are you doing? It's been a while, hasn't it? BSAA won't let us send any emails or letters, but I gave this directly to an employee to give to you, so it should be safe. Our location is still hidden. So that makes sense if they're trying to stop the connections from, tapping into emails or intercepting any letters. Because I'm sure an international crime syndicate that has Brandon Bailey, the right-hand man of Oswald E. Spencer, like someone with that kind of experience, I'm sure they would be able to use such techniques like that. I've always wanted to tell you how thankful I am. Ethan and I would have died in that house if it hadn't been for you. It must have been hard to fight all alone for so long, so thank you. I can't tell you where we are, but we're safe and happy. I feel like we've settled down into our new life. The house BSAA gave us is huge. I don't know what to do with it all. Oh, that reminds me, there's a reason I wanted to write you. Okay, but before we continue onward, let me go back to this real quick. So, 2 years had passed, and Zoe ended up working as a rookie reporter for a small newspaper in New Orleans. So only for New Orleans. This was not some kind of national, newspaper at all. Like, look at the Seattle Ledger, for instance. Like, the Seattle Ledger is specific to Seattle. It's not specific to the New York Times or the Washington Post or anything like that. Nothing specific to national news at all. It seems to be specific to the state. So how on earth did Mia know exactly where Zoe was? Unless this employee who Mia maintained contact with somehow had connections to New Orleans? Is that what the case is? Because that once again showcases another lazy shortcut that Capcom has taken to somehow lazily connect Resident Evil 7 to Resident Evil Village in some creative way, like to showcase the in-between events. And they wanted to put in Zoe Baker, so they just thought, well, we'll do it like this. It's perfectly fine. No one's gonna think of it, but I'm thinking about it. I'm sure a lot of people are thinking about it. Like, you've never had to take such shortcuts like this with other Resident Evil games, but it just feels like with Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil Village, there are just a lot more shortcuts in the narrative that Capcom is trying to put upon us, and it's just very lazy. It's like with the whole idea of the BSAA somehow knowing about the location of Evelyn through an unknown source. How did they know? How did they know exactly where Evelyn was? Who was this unknown source? And the only reason I know about this unknown source is via the timeline that one fan made, that very expansive timeline. It was from the Resident Evil podcast, but the Resident Evil podcast had developed a very gigantic timeline, and one of the details that they highlighted was that apparently Blue Umbrella, or the BSAA, I can't remember which organization it was, they received an anonymous tip that detailed the location of Evelyn. At least I think that's what it was. But that right there is just a very cheap shortcut. Why are they doing that? It's almost like those black lines that you see on classified documents that just like that are just redacted. Like they redact certain pieces of information just to somehow like put aside any thought from that. Like to just say don't focus on that area, just focus right over here, as if it's some kind of jarring transition. It's just such jarring storytelling. I'm not a big fan of it. Ethan and I had a baby. I included a picture of her with this letter. I warned you, she is so cute. We named her Rosemary. Isn't it such a wonderful name? I hope you can come and see her someday. Ethan wants to see you too. I've learned all kinds of local dishes. I'm sure you'll like them. No need to reply. I'm sure we'll meet again someday. Take care of yourself, okay? Sincerely, Mia Winters. Now, this is another confusing thing as well. What kind of job does Mia have right now? It's not detailed in Resident Evil Village what kind of job Mia has, unless there's something in the house that you can explore to indicate what kind of job Mia has. How did she know how to contact Zoe, and how did she know where she was? And how on earth did the employee that she connected with know exactly where Zoe was? It's just a very cheap shortcut, and I'm not a big fan of it. It just seems awfully convenient. A letter from Mia and Ethan out of nowhere, and they have a daughter. I had almost given up finding them. I couldn't hold back the tears. I'm glad the three of them are happy in their new life. Just as I went to close the mailbox, I spotted another envelope. This is the part that really confuses me, right? It was embossed with the BSAA logo, the sender unknown. It contained the following. BSAA HQ, warning letter to Chris Redfield. Chris, we are growing concerned with your recent activity. According to recent reports, you have taken personal control of the elite unit, the Hound Wolf Squad, without permission, and you've accessed a number of top-secret documents, also without permission. What the hell are you doing? Now, this is strange, because I could have sworn in the concept art for Resident Evil Village, it mentioned that the Hound Wolf Squad wasn't something that, like predated the Village incident. It was specifically made to combat the Lycans. That's why the term Hound Wolf Squad was, like that name is supposed to be a dead giveaway. But it seems like this unit has been around for a while, and the fact that Chris has managed to take control of it without permission is concerning for the BSAA. So that's odd, though. That's really odd. And you've accessed a number of top secret documents, also without permission. What kind of top secret documents, though? Why would they be trying to gain access to top secret documents? And like he's like, does it relate to Miranda? Does it relate to Oswald Lee Spencer? Like, did the BSAA somehow integrate Blue Umbrella within its structure, similar to how in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Shield took in Hydra, like, or rather, they took in Hydra scientists and German scientists, and then that was how Hydra was able to formulate itself within Shield, to the point where Shield was actually Hydra. That's what we saw in Captain America: The Winter Soldier. That's how Zola was able to generate the new Hydra within Shield. So is it possible that remnants of Blue Umbrella's dark past are actually appearing here? And maybe they've somehow taken control of the BSAA? And this person that's actually giving this warning letter is actually a member of the bad Umbrella? So, like, what are we supposed to think? And like I said, this whole storyline with the BSAA is just, it's so tacked on. It's just tacked on without any proper build-up to signify the BSAA's transformation into a very rotten organization. And we still don't know what happened to the other members. What happened to Jill? What happened to Parker? What happened to Sheva Alomar? What happened to those people? What happened to the other soldiers that Chris was in command of when he was in the BSAA? Are they working with Chris? Are they working to dig up dirt on the BSAA? Like, why isn't there any detail about those kind of characters? Like, there was originally going to be a moment where Ada Wong would appear in Resident Evil Village, but they didn't bother including it because of it conflicted with certain scenarios. And personally, I'm glad, because I wanted Ethan to survive on his own. But, like, if they're willing to take the time to put in a character like Ada Wong, why didn't they consider the other characters when they came up with the whole idea of the BSAA being a rotten organization? Like, are they becoming the new Umbrella? Is Blue Umbrella trying to assert its control? Is the BSAA going to become Umbrella? Like, is it just there to generate a lot of questions? But, like, you can't just create this kind of storyline that's meant to generate questions without some kind of build-up, without some kind of surprise, without something within the game world that indicates the BSAA's like fall into a rotten organization, like some kind of news article, some kind of file, something. but it's just not indicated that well, and the only indication we get is when we play as Chris, and we see that the BSAA have actually employed bioorganic weapons. But why, though? Why are they trying to use bioorganic weapons to fight other bioorganic weapons? Who is in command of the BSAA? And if Chris was one of the founding members, why didn't he try to stop it? Who is actually in control of the BSAA now? Despite the fact that he's one of the original 11, why is he not in control? And this is one of the parts that really confused me with the BSAA. You know, the idea of a BSAA HQ, and Chris was actually with Alpha Team. Like, he represented Alpha Team. That's so confusing, and, I mean, like, we don't really see any kind of, indication of Blue Umbrella in Resident Evil Village at all. We don't see their logo, we don't see any mention of them, not even in the Baker Incident report, or anywhere else. So what's up with Blue Umbrella? Is the BSA the new Blue Umbrella, or the new bad umbrella? Like, what are we doing right now? What is New Capcom doing with this kind of storyline? It's definitely one of the parts of the story that I just can't find a lot of reason to gel with. What are you and your squad doing in Eastern Europe? Who the fuck is this Miranda that keeps popping up in your correspondences? What's with the investigation into the Winters family? So maybe the classified documents, like these top secret documents, probably have something to do with the Winters family. And he also gained access to them without permission. So how though? Like, did he somehow use his status as the original, like as one of the original 11 to somehow use that to his advantage to gain access to these documents? Maybe there were some soldiers that were big fans of him, like with Finn from Resident Evil 6. I don't know. It's confusing. But whatever these top secret documents are, it's not elaborated on in Resident Evil Village, and I doubt it will be, unless it's elaborated on in Resident Evil 9, because it did say that they're going to be a Europe HQ. And what the heck is a correspondence? Okay, communication by exchanging letters with someone. Oh, so Chris was actually exchanging letters? You've been very critical of BSAA since the Baker incident, and very critical. So, like, he was already voicing a lot of distrust towards the BSAA ever since he had to work alongside Blue Umbrella. Like he said, maybe the BSAA is convinced. If they weren't, I wouldn't be here. But working with Umbrella is going to take some getting used to on my part. And then Veronica had mentioned in another Hero DLC that, I know it must be difficult, but to tell you the truth, a lot of our members have been with us since even before we reincorporated as a PMC. About all that's left now is the name. Let's just focus on the mission and maybe we can continue this conversation later on. Okay? Sure, whatever. So that's what happened there. That's the only mention we get right there. So that may have been one of the things that that led to him being very critical of the BSAA. But you might be one of the founding original 11, but I cannot let you continue to run around unchecked, so I will repeat myself. What the hell are you doing? BSAA HQ investigations. So we're seeing here that the BSAA, it just seems to be that they're becoming this rotten organization similar to Umbrella, and Chris is not trusting of them at all. There's one thing scribbled on the back of this. It's not over. So, who was that? It can't have been Chris, because why the heck would Chris try to contact Zoe? I mean, he mentioned to Ethan that this job is hard enough without civilians getting in the way in Heisenberg's factory. So it's clear that he values the lives of civilians, but why would he want to get Zoe Baker involved? Which is why I don't think this is Chris who sent this. The sender is unknown. Yeah, so there's one thing scribbled on the back of this. It's not over. But what do you mean it's not over? What does that mean? Is it referring to the mold? Is that what it's referring to? Is it referring to Ethan and Mia likely being under threat? Like, it's so unclear. It must be related to the mold. It has to be, which is what we got with Resident Evil Village. This is everything I have on the Baker incident. It's purely for my own reference. I don't intend to send it out to the general public. I will continue my investigation. Many have tried to get in my way, slow me down, but I'm doing this for my family. I won't give up. I know that someday I'll be able to give Ethan and Mia my thanks directly. At least I pray I can. Now here's something that's a little confusing. So we know that Rose is she's 6 months old in Resident Evil Village. But where exactly does this interview take place? Is she saying like 2 years after the interview, like, or this report was actually developed? Not an interview. Sorry, I meant the report. But she's saying that 2 years after like the first time doing this Baker incident report, like actually starting it. So did she start this report in 2019? Well, then again, like they constantly say that 3 years passed between the events of Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil Village, even though it's technically 2021 in Resident Evil Village. So it might be that it's not officially like 4 years, so they're referring to it as 3 years. But are we to assume that she started this whole report in 2018? Like how long was she with the BSAA? How long exactly? I'm not seeing anything else on this. Hmm. But 2 years passed, and that's when she received that letter to Mia. Oh, I'm sorry, 2019 or 2018, since it's officially not like it's officially not been 3 years since Resident Evil 7, so I imagine I have to apply the same logic there. A little confusing. But then again, this whole incident report's very confusing. This is everything I have on the Bakery incident. It's purely for my own reference. I don't intend to send it out to the general public. I will continue my investigation. Many have tried to get in my way, slow me down, but I'm doing this for my family. I won't give up. I know that someday I'll be able to give Ethan and Mia my thanks directly. At least I pray I can. My name is Zoe Baker, a survivor of this tragedy. The Baker incident report has ended. So, overall, I don't really like this report. I mean, yes, it does provide some background details and the connections and a little bit more of an understanding with how the mold works. But I mean, it still doesn't detail enough. It completely neglects the stage mutations. It completely neglects like some of the abilities displayed by Jack, Marguerite, and Lucas. And it doesn't really help understand the Cadu parasite greatly in Resident Evil Village or the Megamycete. Hmm. So I mean, it's probably there for story purposes, obviously, because you can access this Baker incident report before even playing the game. So maybe they just wanted to avoid spoilers. It's the concept, or like the tragedy of Ethan Winters concept of that has the spoilers, not the Baker incident report. But I'm not really a big fan of this report. I mean, it takes a lot of shortcuts with the storytelling, and it's just very lazy. I mean, there are parts of it that are cool, but other parts that are pretty shit. But that has been my official thoughts on the Baker incident report. Stay tuned for a potential video detailing the concept art, or at least looking through the concept art of Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil Village. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.